So the next presentation everyone's excited about, it's a big crowd here already, it's going to be on the GH5. So it's going to be done by Griffin Hammond. Griffin is a documentary filmmaker in New York, known for producing DIY filmmaking tutorials for indie filmmakers and his award-winning documentary Sriracha. Today he's going to share behind-the-scenes stories from his latest short film, Hand Cut, which is the first documentary shot on the Panasonic GH5.
Oh.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me okay? Thanks for having me, Panasonic NAB booth. So who's interested in the Panasonic GH5? Anyone have a GH5? Just go with it. Wonderful. So today I'm going to talk about the film that I shot, Hand Cut, on the GH5. You'll see it on, it's periodically playing on this TV over here by the GH5s. You can check them out over there. But I want to just go behind the scenes, talk about how I shot the thing and my experience shooting with the GH5. And real quick, my history. I shot a documentary called Sriracha on the Panasonic GH3. Then I got the GH4, of course, and in 2016 I covered the presidential election. I did all sorts of things. Here's a woman crying when Bernie Sanders dropped out. Shot that in 4K. And then in 2017 I was very lucky to get the Panasonic GH5 very early. I shot this film, Hand Cut, about ice in December. I got to shoot the first documentary on the GH5. And they even put me in the behind-the-scenes promo video for the GH5. So it was a real honor to be pulled into the Panasonic family, because I've been someone who's been using it since the beginning. I actually had the GH1 in 2010. And I show you this because I just think it's incredible that I picked up this kind of camera in 2010 and pretty much built a career from then. That was my first HD camera. And it doesn't take that much learning to really, understand this line of cameras, to get great at it, and to make some really cool stuff with it. So this is the film that I made called Hand Cut. I imagine, just because of the way it's plugged in, we're probably not watching it in 60p, but this is shot in 4K, 60 frames per second, and I'll talk a little bit about some of the advantages of doing that. I mostly just shot it that way because the camera could, and I wanted to see if I liked that format or not. I'd never been able to shoot such a high frame rate in 4K. So real quick, let me just show you what gear I use and why I use it. Right now I'm shooting with two Panasonic GH5 bodies. One's here, one's here. I have several Panasonic lenses that I like, and I've gravitated towards the Panasonic lenses just because they're so small. It's like, the reason I use these cameras is because it's so lightweight. And if I'm gonna throw a lens on it, you could put any lens you want, and I have shot with some Canon lenses, but the Panasonic native lenses are just so small, and that helps me stay pretty tight. So one of my favorites that I'm shooting with right now is the 12 to 35 millimeter. It's an f2.8 lens, just a perfect all-purpose documentary lens. I shot almost all of Sriracha on the GH3 with that lens. It's just, I like wide shots. The 12 millimeter is beautiful. The 35 millimeter is perfect for close-ups in interviews. But for Hand Cut, it was a film that was shot almost entirely in bars, and I really wanted to make sure I was doing well in low light. And I also have recently fallen in love with a couple primes on the Micro Four Thirds system. So I shot almost all of that film on the 12 millimeter prime. It's an f1.4. And then there's the 42.5 millimeter. It's an f1.2 lens. So they're just both low light beasts and beautiful shallow depth of field. I had a lot of fun shooting with those. I also have here on this camera the Panasonic 7 to 14 millimeter, which I love for time lapses. I'll show you some time lapses in a minute, the shots I got with this. But it's funny, I actually chopped off some of the lens hood. I don't know if Panasonic intended me to do that, but I throw a lot of ND filters on, and I wanted to make sure I could get some really long exposures for my time lapses. So I actually shaved down that lens hood a little bit just so I could get this weird little, there's this little device that you can put ND filters on this lens. I will say, Panasonic has just released a 8 to 18 millimeter that kind of solves this problem. it doesn't have the weird flower petal hood. It has a flat hood on it now that you can put ND filters on. I just didn't have that lens yet. I also use, for this film, I shot with one light. I had the Westcott ice light, which is kind of funny that I shot a film about ice with an ice light. But I wasn't using a lot of light for this film. I mostly used it for the interviews. I shot with an audio recorder for my interviews, the Zoom H5. I didn't yet have the new XLR adapter that's available for the GH5. I could have, had I had that, I could have shot the interviews this way, the way that I'm shooting right now. But I also often use an audio recorder. And then I use the Rode NTG3 microphone, which I have on right now, the shotgun microphone, phantom powered, which I can't use the phantom power on this XLR adapter because it's all powered by the camera battery. And then stabilization, I normally use a Manfrotto tripod. Today I'm just traveling with a really lightweight Mi Photo tripod. My favorite piece of equipment though, I want to know how many people have heard of this before, the Pedco Ultra Clamp. Anyone familiar with this? Just Nick, who does my podcast with me. The Pedco Ultra Clamp, it's just this little tiny clamp. It has a ball head on it. And I'll show you some pictures of how I use this thing. I also used a jib in this film, the Canova Sun jib. So here are some examples of how I use the Pedco Ultra Clamp. The reason I love it, and it's one of the reasons I like this camera, this family of cameras, the GH series, is they've always been so lightweight. So actually, like, on the right here is an Instagram I posted from the high roller. Recently I wanted to do a time lapse of the high roller going up, and of course there's no tripods allowed on that ride. So I just took the clamp, put it on the safety bar there, and shot it that way. I've also occasionally used it like a tripod. I usually travel very lightweight. You're looking at all my gear right now. I travel with a little tiny backpack with 2 camera bodies, 4 lenses, audio recorder, and a lot of times I'll just bring one tripod. I'll shoot an interview with like a chair as my second tripod. I'll just mount this. I shot like a Ted Cruz interview that way, when I was doing news. So it's one of the things I love about these cameras. One of my favorite stories about shooting with these is when I was covering politics for Bloomberg. I covered the Golden Globes, and I also covered the White House Correspondents' Dinner, both red carpet events. And I put on a nice tuxedo. I have this little camera with me. I think I might have even just had an audio recorder in my pocket or something. And there's a penned-in press area where you're supposed to get all your shots from, but I wasn't getting the shots I wanted. So I just walked out onto the red carpet with this camera, and just, this is kind of how I shoot, handheld, close to my body for stabilization, and no one stopped me, because I'm not carrying a giant shoulder camera. I mean, all due respect to VariCam that's here, but there are many different options for you in the Panasonic cinema world, and I just personally like a very small camera. It lets me do some things and get away with things that I maybe wouldn't be able to otherwise. And it definitely influenced the style of my shooting on the ICE documentary. Here's actually a corporate video I shot. I just clamped the camera to the bottom of a forklift. I felt really scared about this because I still was one of the only people in the world with a GH5. But I just thought I have to get shots like this, and then stabilized it on the bottom. So just to show you, I get a lot of questions about the in-body image stabilization on this camera and how I shot some of the shots I did in this film. I did have some tripod shots, like the opening. I mean, almost anything that's a time lapse or like a wide shot, I would throw on the tripod. My interview shots for the film, I would shoot on a tripod. I had a couple like panning tripod shots in the film, but for the most part, a lot of it was handheld. There were some times with the ice cutting. I'll show you a little bit of that in a minute. We had a chainsaw cutting through ice, and I wasn't sure how many chances I would get to see this. So I did have one tripod lockdown shot with the 42.5 millimeter, and then I was running around with the 12 millimeter handheld, just so I could double up on all that action. Also for stabilization, I have lots of time lapses. Of course, I put those on a tripod. I shot those with the 7 to 14 millimeter. I had an ND filter on to get really long exposures so I can make this stuff really flowing motion blur. Another thing I really like about shooting with this camera is that it has the built-in intervalometer. I think they've had that since the GH4, maybe even the GH3. So so I can shoot these time lapses. I also had a jib on this shoot, so a few more of my stabilized shots were done with a jib, which made it look really nice and pretty. But I show you these tripod shots, these jib shots, just to say that's pretty much all of those in this 5-minute film. I threw hundreds of shots in this film, and most of them are handheld. It's just the way I like to shoot. And the in-body image stabilization on this new camera really helped me. It's not going to make everything look like a dolly shot. It's not going to look like a jib shot necessarily unless you're applying some post-stabilization. But the in-body image stabilization will completely remove that jitter that I had, which I didn't notice so much in 1080, but when I'm shooting in 4K or blowing it up on a big screen, before, especially with a telephoto lens, I would really notice just that little handheld shake. My shots still look handheld because that's my style. I'm shooting that way, I'm moving around. But the in-body image stabilization on any lens, even this one that doesn't have its own stabilization, now that it's doing it in the body, everything I'm shooting with is a little bit prettier. And here are some of those shots. Oh, I really like this shot, just pouring whiskey. That one almost looks like a tripod shot. No, that's handheld. I mean, 90% of the shots in this are handheld. In fact, I'm going to show you an extended look at this in a second. So yeah, let's take a look at, this is kind of in the middle of the film. It's a 5-minute film. This part's kind of fun. Let's see what we have here. I don't know if we can hear it though. So yeah, clearly these shots are handheld, and I'm really moving around. This is handheld. A lot of this was shot with that 12mm prime lens. And you can't hear it, but the film has classical music here, which goes nicely with the action of, yeah. So the 12mm is a really wide lens, and I love getting really close with it. And I was also kind of intrigued to try out the fact that this is a splash-proof camera. So I thought, let's just get really close to that chainsaw. And it's also freeze-proof, so I felt pretty good about getting all this ice all over myself. Now, one of the reasons I'm showing you this part of the film is because there's a lot of movement. I shot it in 60 frames per second in 4K, and there's a couple ways you can deliver this. I delivered this film in 4K 60p. I think if you go later and watch it on this TV over here, you'll see it in true 60p. You'll see all that extra detail. It goes well nicely with all this movement, all this chipping of the ice. But not everyone loves. Who doesn't like the look of 60 frame video? Anyone? Yeah, a few people. Some people don't. Yeah, and I don't love it when TVs make those extra frames out of 30p footage. So I think we've gotten used to 60 frame footage. It can look bad. Sometimes it's because the TV's doing it to otherwise good footage. I wanted to see what 60p would look like, but even if you don't like watching 60p, you can, of course, shoot 4K 60p and slow it down. So let's take a look at what happens when I slow down that same scene down to 24 frames per second. Occasionally you might get a little bit of jitter because of the connection to the computer, but it's a very smooth, beautiful 24 frames when you slow it down. So that's another thing you can do. You can get 40% slow motion by shooting in 4K 60p. The other thing I liked about shooting that way is that now my shutter speed is half as much as what it was before. When I'm shooting 30 frames per second, I'm usually shooting at a 1/60th shutter speed, the 180-degree rule. But when I'm shooting in 4K 60p, I'm using a 1/120th of a second shutter speed. I'm actually not even thinking about that anymore. I just turned on the angle on the camera. So you can just set it to 180 degrees shutter and it'll figure that out for you. But the nice thing about shooting that way is that, one, it's 4K, so the resolution's pretty good. It's closer to a photograph than 1080. And because my motion blur is half as much, these photos look a little bit better. I mean, they're not photos. If I was really shooting photos, I would get no motion blur if that's what I wanted. But the fact that I'm shooting video, but I can punch these shots in, and I'm getting half as much motion blur as I would have otherwise, this just would be messier. I wouldn't be seeing specks of ice. And I think when you're watching in 60p, your eyes are picking up all that extra detail. So I just really enjoyed shooting this piece that way. It turned out this was a good piece to shoot that way because of all that movement. So that's what I wanted to tell you, but I'd love to answer any questions you have about the GH5 or my shooting style. Is there anything I can help you figure out? Who has a question? Yeah. Yeah, do I ever change my 180-degree shutter and shoot a different shutter? If I'm going for that look, like I want that more like action Saving Private Ryan look, of course I can go to a much faster shutter speed. I've had a lot, I'm not a big like effects person, but I hear a lot of people, I mean, it makes sense to shoot with no motion blur if you're doing green screen or other visual effects, and you can always add it back in post. I have done that with time lapses, especially if I'm not getting the amount of motion blur that I wanted. I might add some post motion blur to it. And occasionally I've lowered my shutter speed and introduced a little bit more motion blur just to expose better. Like if I'm in a really dark place, I'm willing to sacrifice a little bit of that. But generally I'm right on where I want to be. Any questions? Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like 40 degrees. I'm saying you like.
Yeah.
Are you shooting 144 or are you shooting 40?
Yeah, let me, I'll pull up some of the film. I was often shooting at f1.4 on this film. Let's see if I can skip ahead. Probably the bar scenes. That's probably f1.4.
So it's a 12 millimeter right there?
Actually, that might have been the 14, I mean the 42.5. Yeah. This is probably the 12 millimeter because I'm close to the glass.
That's a jib shot?
That's a jib shot, yeah. Yeah. This might be, let's see, this is the 7 to 14 millimeter.
Okay, so I have a
This is probably the 42.5.
I bought the 7 to
Yeah.
14 millimeter using calculator for my life.
Yeah.
So, and you filter.
Yeah. So what I did is to put ND filters on the 7 to 14 millimeter, I bought this little, I can't even remember what it's called. It's like a little 3D printed, this thing goes on top of the lens hood. My problem though was, I put this on here and out of the box, I could only get about 10 millimeters on this lens before I was getting vignetting, major vignetting in the corners. That's why I went in and I just chopped off part of the lens hood. I felt really bad that I was destroying this lens, but it still works. And like I said, the new 8 to 18 millimeter doesn't have that problem. It has a flat filter ring on the front. But I like to mix a little bit of DIY solutions in my filmmaking stuff.
I should talk about that a bit because I've been trying to figure that out.
Yeah.
There's a couple of like a gear one, they're on stock.
Yeah.
I saw things that guys carry out.
Right, well I'm sure you could put like a big flat, yeah, and just tape it on. Yeah. I do that a lot. Sometimes for a while I didn't even have the right step-up rings for my lenses. I was trying to use the same ND filters. So a lot of times I would just gaff tape an ND filter onto the front of a lens that was the wrong size for that.
Is this a 77 millimeter?
Yeah, this is a 77 millimeter ND filter. What other questions do you have? Yeah. So I actually edit in Final Cut Pro 10, so I haven't had any issues with 10 bits. But I know that it does seem like there's a little bit of growing pains when you release a new camera that can do some really cool things. Not every piece of software is ready for it, but it seems like with some firmware updates or software updates, people are correcting these problems. Yeah, so it's funny because I think my pre-production version of this camera couldn't do 4K 60p in MOV mode, so I got used to shooting everything in MP4, which Final Cut always liked those files. Occasionally QuickTime or Finder would say like, I don't know what this is, but Final Cut would handle it just fine. But yeah, now that the camera's done and it can shoot everything in MOV or MP4, I can shoot either way. So. Yeah. Yeah. So you're saying Finder can't handle the other 10-bit files? Yeah, that's a lot of data. When I first got this camera, I shot 4K 60p, and I thought I could edit proxy in Final Cut 10, but it'd be really fun to edit the 4K 60p footage that I shot. So I put it on my 2011 iMac, and it couldn't play it. It couldn't keep up with those files. So I had to go out and buy a new iMac just to handle the new footage. But you always have that option to go proxy. Lighting? No lighting in any of these scenes you see in the ice shop. That's all just sunlight coming in. Anytime we're in the bar, I did have that one ice light. might be getting a little bit of that light. There's a little bit of light here. But I was kind of using half their light that they had, half like one ice light in a corner for the interviews. So that's why I really was relying on these fast lenses to do well in low light. Oh, thank you. Thank you.
It was just so cool seeing it in 60p, especially as a documentary.
Yeah. 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 So at least one person who likes watching 60p. I actually was very excited that I was worried that when Panasonic released this film I shot, that it would just be covered in comments like 60 sucks, no one likes 60 frames. But my goal was, if I shoot something that's pretty, if I shoot it the same way I would, you know, with the same principles I would if I was shooting in 30 or 24, hopefully people will like it. If I'm using jib shots, which looks cinematic, people can't say it's not cinematic just because it's 60p. And I think I was pretty happy with the response I got. Yeah.
Have you ever worked with Vlog?
Vlog, I've tried Vlog on the GH4. I'm not much of a colorist, so I'm like, this is pretty cool, this is very flat. And then when I bring it into color, I'm like, I'm a little bit out of my element here. If I was working with a colorist, I would definitely be shooting Vlog. And that's one thing you can do on the GH5. You also, on the GH5, can load LUTs. So you could shoot in Vlog, but load a LUT to see what closer what your final shot will look like in the camera, which is kind of cool. So I'll have to shoot some more Vlog stuff, but I'm just not very experienced with that. Yeah.
So what you're saying is that the stuff that's on the film is not necessarily color augmented or color corrected?
It is a tiny bit, so I like to shoot in the photo style. I've always liked on these cameras the natural color profile. It's pretty close to standard, but it's just a little bit flatter, and so it just gives me a little bit of latitude to push the color temperature either direction. If I want to bump up the saturation, I did that a lot in Sriracha, just 'cause it's a film about peppers, and I really want the red to pop. And I do go through and probably every shot, just change it a little bit, maybe change the contrast depending on what the shot needs.
But it's not like a full-on color corrected.
Yeah, I don't consider myself a colorist. I consider myself someone who kind of knows how to make it look okay for TV. Yeah.
Here's some settings I noticed that actually make it look better.
Yeah.
Are you going to make something like that for the GH5? Just like small modifications you noticed, like options to turn on or off.
I just did.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, so the question was, am I going to make like a GH5 setup video?
Yeah.
So this is kind of fun that like Panasonic found me to do this. I made 3 years ago, I made a GH4 setup video just because I've loved this line of cameras. And it became very popular. Anyone seen that video? Okay, cool. I think it's kind of like the instruction manual for the GH4 in 15 minutes. And so I have had people ask me to make the GH5 one, and so I just did that. But I think it's that video that got Panasonic's attention and brought me into the family, let me have these cameras. Yeah. So yeah, on my website, griffinhammond.com/GH5, I have more videos that I've shot. I have the how to set up your GH5 camera. On this camera, you can save your settings. So I've just gone ahead and saved my settings and put them on my website. So if you want, you can load my settings and then watch the video and understand why I set it that way. Yeah. What other questions do you have about doc filmmaking or the Panasonic GH5? Yeah.
You said you travel light. Do you just like throw the bodies like in a backpack like that, or do you like to set up, break them down?
So I do travel very light. Right now I travel with a Think Tank Perception Pro. I also use a Low Pro. This is like my small walking around bag. But that Think Tank bag, one, I got it because I started doing red carpet events and I was like, I need something that looks a little bit prettier on my bag. But two, it can fit a lot. And so I can get, I leave the lenses on. I just put this in a pocket so I can get a couple of camera bodies in there. I do usually pack one way for the airport, like really tight, and then when I get to my destination, I kind of unload into 2 bags to make it a little bit easier to shoot with. But I don't check a bag. I have a carry-on roller bag that I can usually throw my tripod in, my tiny light kit in. I managed to bring clothes somehow, but then all my camera gear's in that bag, and I can just run off the plane and go shoot the documentary. Another reason I like this small camera body. Yeah. The new 12 to 60 millimeter lens I have not used, and I kind of wondered if I would even want it because I really like the 12 to 35 millimeter. It's a constant aperture f2.8 lens, so compared to my primes, still does very well in low light. It's my favorite lens. I thought I don't need the 12 to 60 because it's f2.8 to 4, but I just threw it on my camera, and I love the versatility of 12 to 60. That's a nice range. If any of you are used to Canons, that's like a 24 to 120. My longer lens, I don't shoot a lot of long lenses. I have the 35 to 100 millimeter, which complements this one nicely, but I feel weird having two equally valuable lenses, and I use this one 90% of the time, and I almost never use the 35 to 100. Just, it's my own personal shooting style. I really like wide angle. I like the way it kind of distorts faces and distance. I just love that. I'm not really a telephoto shooter. And it probably fits my handheld shooting style. I guess if I was running around like this all the time with like 100 millimeter, everything would be pretty shaky. Yeah. Yeah. So I've always shot audio separately ever since I got onto the Lumix system, just because one, I needed it when I had the GH1, and I like having the control over the audio, and I do like some of the flexibility of, you know, I can put this recorder wherever I want away from the camera. But they just came out with this XLR adapter, and it's phantom powered, which means I can finally put my best microphone, the NTG3, on the camera because it needs phantom power. And you know, for people that don't do a lot of editing or don't want to have to sync in post, I can even, right now I've set this mic to be on both the left and the right channel. So it's recording right into the camera, it's ready to go. I can upload this straight to YouTube right now if I wanted. So there's a lot of benefits there. I even wanted to walk around the show floor and thought, well, I'm gonna have to pack this too. What am I gonna do with this? Am I gonna put it on my belt or something? And I realized, oh no, I have the XLR adapter now. It's perfect for news gathering situations when I don't, you know, maybe I don't need this. But I mean, I have the headphone jack on the GH5, so I can monitor the audio. It has two XLR inputs. It's a little bit more expensive than an audio recorder. I think this is around 300. That retails for 400. But you get the convenience of it's half the size of this, and it's powered by the camera. I actually have a problem with this thing always running out of battery. It thinks it's out all the time. I don't know why, even though it has fresh batteries. So I'm willing to give this a big chance. What other questions do you have? Might be near. It's not wireless, but it doesn't need a wire to go into the camera. It's a hot shoe adapter. So I just have the shotgun mic plugged in via XLR right into the adapter. It's on top of the camera. I kind of hate wireless. I don't trust it. It's maybe one of the reasons I shoot, you know, I shoot almost everything manual. I'm in manual focus, I'm in manual aperture and shutter, and I just don't love knowing that the wireless mic could decide to do its own thing or have interference. It scares me, so I try to avoid it when I can.
Do you have any sense of what the preamp is like this?
I don't know much about the preamp on that. I've just started shooting with it. And I'm not the smartest sound guy, but I've always had good luck with these Rode mics. What else can I help you figure out?
You don't have one of Gimbals?
I haven't used a gimbal, and I think it's because my style is to edit very fast, so I like to show shots for only about a second, and so I don't need them to be all perfectly beautiful. My style just seems to be a little bit faster and running around, and it's lightweight, so I really love the idea of an electronic gimbal, but I'm just afraid to bring all that stuff with me. I do have a jib, so this is a rare piece that I got to shoot in New York City where I live. Normally I'm traveling, so I shot it mostly the way that I normally shoot, but because I could run to my apartment and grab the jib, I decided to try it out on this shoot. Like, oh, like, I mean, I occasionally fake a jib shot, but it never looks perfect. I mean, even in-body image stabilization isn't made to make it look motionless, like completely still. It gets rid of that little shake, but, you know, I don't trust myself to perfectly move my arms like a jib. There is an even more advanced stabilization built in. You can go to, like, I think it's called video mode or something. I don't think I would want that for most of my shooting, but you can bump up the stabilization even more.
What about the stabilization of the 12 to 35 as opposed to the new 12 to 35?
Yeah. If I get this wrong, Sean from Panasonic here can probably help me. But my understanding is that I have the older 12 to 35. There's a new version 2 of the 12 to 35 millimeter. Each of them has dual IS, dual image stabilization, meaning that the 12 to 35 has always had its own on-lens stabilization, OIS, optical image stabilization, and then the body has image stabilization, so they work together, so they're not correcting in the wrong directions, they work in tandem. The new 12 to 35 just collects more data points per second.
It's 5 stop per surround.
So it's giving the camera a little bit more information to work with to make those in-body image stabilization decisions, but you're still getting it on the older one. I don't know if it's...
From a stills perspective, there's a stop difference in stabilization effectiveness.
Yeah.
But there's other differences between lenses. Seamless iris versus non-seamless, freeze-proof, shock-proof.
Yeah. So a few updates on this lens, but this is still a great lens, and it's made even better because it has dual IS now. Yeah.
Have you used the Metabones in the GH5?
Oh, I haven't used it on the GH5 yet. I had a Metabones, and I had a Tokina 11 to 16 millimeter lens once. That's what I used to shoot all my time lapses on. And then I was at Donald Trump's election night victory party because I was covering the election for Bloomberg, and it was a long campaign, and I was tired at the end of it, and I managed to lose the lens and the Metabones. So if anyone in New York at like the Hilton finds this Metabones in my lens, please let me know. But that was one of the reasons I was willing to try the 7-14 and realized, oh, it does everything that lens did, except it's tiny. I mean, maybe it's not as fast. That lens was very fast, especially with Metabones. It was like f2. I think this is f4. But for time lapses, I don't think I didn't really need that shallow to feel, especially on such a wide lens.
Are your time lapse, are you using any motion, or are you just doing the motion in post?
I usually do the motion in post for my time lapses. I'll just shoot them. I mean, that's one of the beauties of shooting with this large sensor and all the megapixels. I'm shooting much higher resolution than 4K video. So I'll shoot the time lapse in as wide as I can. I'll add a little Ken Burns effect or some sort of push. And people always think that I'm shooting on like a motorized slider. Yeah. Again, I'm trying to pack light, so being able to do all that in post is nice. That's good enough.
Yeah. Okay, so this is regards more to like the pitching itself. Okay. So I watched your thing about selling Sriracha.
Yeah.
And making money. So you're pretty much you're doing these on your own dime, and then you're going and trying to sell them after, correct?
Yeah.
So you just thought Sriracha would be a good story, you went and made it. How long did it take you to make Sriracha?
So this question is about the documentary I made in 2013 called Sriracha, and I paid for it myself. Well, I was willing to pay for it myself. Then while I was shooting, I did a Kickstarter campaign, and people prepaid for the entire film that way. We raised $20,000. But I just knew I wanted to make a documentary about Sriracha, so...
Okay, cool. So the next step is to monetize.
Yeah.
Okay, so you sold it to Netflix, you sold all your...
I didn't sell it to Netflix, but it is on Amazon Prime.
Right, okay, so you went through a distribution deal with somebody like who? You mind if I ask?
I mostly did self-distribution.
Okay.
I mean, I have a distributor called Jansen Media, and they've done a little bit, but most of what I've done was putting it directly on Amazon, putting it directly on iTunes. I did a lot of sales through Vimeo.
Okay, got it. So now, how do you deal with your Kickstarter people that still fulfill the obligations of people that are doing your content? They don't care if let somebody else watch it.
No, so my goal with that film was primarily to get into film festivals, and so I was a little bit worried that releasing it to my Kickstarter backers, it would disqualify me from film festivals. But most of the festivals I was applying to don't care for shorts. It's a 33-minute film, so it's a short film.
I would think that would disqualify you from getting it on Amazon Prime or Netflix.
No, Amazon Prime didn't care. They don't need to be the world premiere of the film. They were fine. Yeah. So I had a lot of distribution opportunities available to me after making that film. And actually, I've been submitting Hand Cut, the film that I shot for Panasonic with the GH5, to several film festivals. The first two that I've heard back from, I got into this film festival called Asians on Film in California, and I got into the Sacramento Food Film Festival, which played there recently. Yeah. So now I have some little laurels to put with this film too. Well, I think we're just about out of time, but if you have any questions, feel free to find me online. I'm on Twitter. I have a podcast that I do every week answering your questions, and you can find some more GH5 videos at griffinhammond.com/GH5. So thanks for having me.
So much when I went to CES, they built a subway car because they wanted to see clamping the camera.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta, to get the shot.
Yeah.
See you tomorrow.
Yeah, see you tomorrow. Domestically, no one seems to say that's a carry-on.
But you can pull this off for a monocula too, right?
Yeah. I was a little bit worried that flying internationally, someone would stop me from carrying a tripod on the plane. So I got this small tripod so I could pack it.
It's not a stroller, you'll be fine.
Yeah.
Can I ask you what the white square is?
Oh, yeah.
Is that part of your lighting?
Yeah, this is my new lighting kit.
Oh, I've seen the LED flex lighting.
Yeah, it's the Westcott Flex Light. It kind of goes against my frugal filmmaking nature because it's pretty expensive. The 2-light kit is $3,000. You get 2 of these. They come with frames to make them more robust, and then it comes with lighting stands, batteries, it's battery powered, and a little controller that if I could turn it on right now, which I can't because the controller's in the bag, it's super bright. It's like surprisingly bright. That's why it's so expensive.
What kind of batteries does it take though?
It uses a giant
a V-Log, right? Or something?
No, it's like its own, just a big battery pack.
Because there's a company that now that's started making these, and you can roll them up and everything else.
Yeah.
They make an 18-incher. Forget what the name of it is, but they got some really good reviews.